Chapter. Morning, we are reading The Science of Breath. We are on Chapter 7, The Four Methods of Respiration. Sorry, I passed it.
I think you got to go up.
Yeah, I passed it. Here it is, mid-breathing.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Number 2, mid-breathing. This method of respiration is known to the Western students as rib breathing or intercostal breathing, and while less objectionable than high breathing, is far inferior to low breathing or to the yogi complete breath. In mid breathing, the diaphragm is pushed upward and the abdomen drawn in. The ribs are raised somewhat and the chest is partially expanded. It is quite common among men who have no study of the subject, as there are two better methods known. We give it only passing notice, and that principally to call your attention to shortcomings. 3. Low breathing. This is the form of respiration is far better than either of the two preceding forms. And of recent years, many Western writers have extolled its merits and have exploited it under the names of abdominal breathing, deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, etc. And much good has been accomplished by the attention of the public having been directed to the subject, and many having been induced to substitute it for the inferior and injurious methods above alluded to. Many systems of breathing have built around low breathing, and the students have paid high prices to learn the new systems. But as we have said, much good has resulted. And after all, the students who paid high prices to learn revamped old systems undoubtedly got their money's worth if they were induced to discard the old methods of high breathing and low breathing. Although many Western authorities write and speak of this method as best known form of breathing, the yogis know it to be but a part of the system which they have used for centuries and which they know as the complete breath. It must be admitted, however, that one must be acquainted with the principles of low breathing before he can grasp the idea of complete breathing. Let us again consider the diaphragm. What is it? We have seen it is the great partition muscle which separates the chest and its contents from the abdomen and its contents. When at rest, it presents a concave surface to the abdomen. That is, the diaphragm is viewed from the abdomen, would seem like a sky as viewed from Earth, the interior of an arched surface. Consequently, the side of the diaphragm toward the chest organs is like a protruding rounded surface, like a hill. When the diaphragm is brought into use, the hill formation is lowered and the diaphragm presses among the abdominal organs and forces out the abdomen. In low breathing, the lungs are given free play than in the methods already mentioned, and consequently, more air is inhaled. This fact has led the majority of Western writers to speak and write of low breathing, which they call abdominal breathing, as the highest and best method known to science. But the Oriental yogi has long known of a better method, and some few Western writers have recognized this fact. The trouble with all methods of breathing other than yogi complete breathing is that none of these methods do the lungs become filled with air. At the best, only a portion of the lung is filled, even in low breathing. High breathing fills only the upper portion, mid fills only the middle and the portion of the upper parts. Low breathing fills only the lower and the middle parts. It is evident that any method that fills the entire lung space must be far preferable to those filling only certain parts. Any method which will fill the entire space must be of greatest value to man in the way of allowing him to absorb the greatest quantity of oxygen to store away the greatest amount of prana. The complete breath is known to the yogi to be the best method of respiration known to science. The yogi complete breath. Yogi complete breathing includes all good points of high breathing, mid breathing, and low breathing, with objectional features of each eliminated. It brings into play the entire respiratory apparatus, every part of the lungs, every air cell, every respiratory muscle. The entire respiratory organism responds to this method of breathing, and the maximum amount of benefit is derived from the minimum expenditure of energy. The chest cavity is increased to its normal limits in all directions, and every part of the machinery performs its natural work and functions. One of the most important features of this method of breathing is the fact that the respiratory muscles are fully called into play. Whereas in other forms of breathing, only a portion of these muscles are so used. In complete breathing, among other muscles, those controlling the ribs are actively used, which increases the space in which the lungs may expand and also gives the proper support of the organs when needed. Nature availing herself of the perfection of the principle of the leverage in this process. Certain muscles hold the lower ribs firmly in position while other muscles bend them outward. Then again, in this method, the diaphragm is under perfect control and is able to perform its function properly in such a manner as to yield the maximum degree of service. In the rib action above alluded to, the lower ribs are controlled by the diaphragm, which draws them slightly downward, while the other muscles hold them into place and the intercostal muscles force them outward, which combined action increases the mid chest cavity to its maximum. In the addition to the muscular action, the upper ribs are also lifted and forced outward by the intercostal muscles, which increases the capacity of the upper chest to its fullest extent. If you have studied the special features of the four given methods of breathing, you will notice these two, that the complete breath comprises of all the advantageous features of the three other methods, plus the reciprocal advantages occurring from the combined action of the high chest, mid chest, and diaphragmatic regions, and the normal rhythm thus obtained. In the next chapter, we will take up the complete breath in practice, and we will give full directions for the acquirement of the superior breathing with exercises, etc. Chapter 8, How to Acquire the Yogi Complete Breath. The Yogi Complete Breath is the fundamental breath of the entire yogi science of breath, and the student must fully acquaint himself with it and master it perfectly before he can hope to obtain results from other forms of breath mentioned and given in this book. He should not be content with half learning it, but should go to work in earnest until it becomes his natural method of breathing. This will require work, time, and patience, but without these things, nothing is ever accomplished. There is no royal road to the science of breath, and the student must be prepared to practice and study in earnest if he expects to receive results. The results obtained by complete mastery of the science of breath are great, and no one who has attained them would willingly go back to old methods. And he will tell his friends that he's considered himself amply repaid for his work. We say these things now that you may fully understand the necessity of the importance of mastering this fundamental method of yogi breathing instead of passing it by and trying some of the attractive looking variations given later in this book. Again, we say to you, start, write, and write results will follow, but neglect your foundations and your entire building will topple over sooner or later. Perhaps the better way to teach you how to develop the yogi complete breath would be to give you a simple directions regarding breath itself and then follow up the same with general remarks concerning it, and then later on giving you exercises for developing the chest muscles and lungs, which have been allowed to remain in an undeveloped condition by imperfect methods of breathing. Right here, we wish to say that this complete breath is not forced or abdom- is not a forced or abnormal thing, but on the contrary, is going back to the first principles of return to nature. The healthy adult savage and healthy infant of civilization both breed in this manner, but civilized man has adopted unnatural methods of living, clothing, etc., and has lost his birthright. And we wish to remind the reader that the complete breath does not necessarily call for the complete filling of the lungs at every inhalation. One may inhale the average amount of air using the complete breathing method and distributing the air inhaled, be the quantity large or small to all parts of the lungs, but one should inhale a series of full, complete breaths several times a day whenever opportunity offers in order to keep the system in good order and condition. The following simple exercise will give you a clear idea of what the complete breath is. Stand or sit erect. Breathing through the nostrils, inhale steadily, first filling up the lower part of the lungs, which is accomplished by bringing into play the diaphragm, which descending exerts a gentle pressure on the abdominal organs, pushing forward the front wall of the abdomen, sorry. Then fill the middle parts of the lungs, pushing out the lower ribs, breastbone, and chest. Then fill the higher portion of the lungs, protruding the upper chest, thus lifting the chest, including the upper 6 or 7 pairs of ribs. In the final movement, the lower part of the abdomen slightly draw in, which movement gives the lungs a support and also helps to fill the highest part of the lungs. At first reading, it may appear that this breath consists of 3 distinct moves. However, it is not correct. The inhalation is continuous, the entire chest cavity from the lower abdomen to the highest point of the chest, and the region of the collarbone being expanded with uniform movement. Avoid a jerking series of inhalation and strive to attain a steady, continuous action. Practice will soon overcome this tendency to divide the inhalation into 3 movements and will result in a uniform, continuous breath. You will be able to complete the inhalation in a couple of seconds after a little practice. Retain the breath a few seconds. Exhale quite slowly, holding the chest in firm position and drawing the abdomen in a little and lifting it upward slowly as the air leaves the lungs. Where the air is entirely exhaled, relax the chest and the abdomen. A little practice will render this part of the exercise easy, and the movement, once acquired, will be afterwards performed almost automatically. It will be seen that by this method of breathing, all parts of the respiratory aspiration apparatus is brought into action, and all the parts of the lungs, including the most remote air cells, are exercised. The chest cavity is expanded in all directions. You will notice that the complete breath is really a combination of low, mid, and high breaths succeeding each other rapidly in the order given, in such a manner as to form one uniform, continuous, complete breath. You will find it quite a help to you if you practice this breath before a large mirror, placing the hands lightly above the abdomen so that you may feel the movements. At the end of this inhalation, it it is well to occasionally slightly elevate the shoulders, thus raising the collarbone and allowing the air to pass freely into the smaller upper lobe of the right lung, which place is sometimes the breeding place of tuberculosis. At the beginning of the practice, you may have more or less trouble in acquiring the complete breath, but a little practice will make perfect, and when you have once acquired it, you will never willingly return to the old methods. Chapter 9, Psychological Effect of the Complete Breath. Scarcely too much can be said of the advantages of attending to the practice of complete breath, and yet the student who has carefully read the foregoing pages would scarcely need to have pointed out to him such advantages. The practice of complete breath will make any man or woman immune to consumption and other pulmonary troubles, and will do away with all liability to contract colds as well as bronchial and similar weaknesses. Consumption is due principally to lower vitality attributable to an insignificant amount of air being inhaled. The impairment of vitality renders the systems open to attacks from disease germs. Imperfect breathing allows a considerable part of the lungs to remain inactive, and such portion offer an inviting field of bacilli, which invading the weakened tissue should soon produce havoc. Good lung tissues will resist the germs, and the only way to have good, healthy lung tissue is to use the lungs properly. Consumptives are nearly all narrow chest. What does this mean? Simply that these people were addicted to improper habits of breathing, and consequently their chests failed to develop and expand. The man who practices the complete breath will have a broad chest, and a narrow-chested man may develop his chest into normal portions if he will but adopt this mode of breathing. Such people must develop their chest cavities if they value their lives. Colds may often be prevented by practicing a little vigorous, complete breathing whenever you feel that you are being unduly exposed. When chilled, breath vigorously a few minutes, you will feel a glow all over the body. Most colds can be cured by complete breathing and partial fasting for a day. The quality of blood depends largely upon this proper oxygenation in the lungs, and if it's under oxygenated, it becomes a poor quality and laden with all sorts of impurities, and the systems suffer from the lack of nourishment and often becomes actually poisoned by waste products remaining uneliminated in the body, as the entire body, every organ, and every part is dependent upon the blood for nourishment. Improper blood must have serious effects upon the entire system. The remedy is plain: practice the complete breath. The stomach and other organs of nutrition suffer much from improper breathing. Not only are they ill nourished by the reason of lack of oxygen, but as the food must absorb oxygen from the blood and become oxygenated before it can be digested and assimilated. It is readily seen how digestion and assimilation is paired by incorrect breathing. And when assimilation is not normal, the system receives less and less nourishment. The appetite fails, bodily vigor decreases, and energy diminishes, and the man withers and declines, all from the lack of proper breathing. Even the nervous system suffers from improper breathing, inasmuch as the brain, the spinal cone, the nerve centers, and the nerves themselves, which improperly nourished by means of blood, become pure and inefficient instruments for generating, storing, and transmitting the nerve's contents. And improperly nourished, they will become if sufficient oxygen is not absorbed through the lungs. I think we'll stop there.
Yeah, I think we have to stop here.
Page 44. So, one of my, I guess it was like a full body workout teachers, who's also a chiropractor, and I don't know, he knows a lot about a lot of different things, but he would always, now that I'm thinking about it, he would always start us off in class. We do a little bit like yoga workout before we started, but he also made us do this, what he called diaphragmatic breathing. And we put like our thumbs on one rib and the other ones on the other fingers on a different rib. And I'm wondering if this was what he was trying to teach us to do.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah, I think so.
I always tell like my students, like the most significant to me, like in terms of asana practice, is the breath. And I always say, like, it makes you move different, and it's just your body flowing. It's so important, and how we breathe, it shapes and changes like the shapes of our body. And when I like that part about the ribs and the chest being like broad, that's so true. Like it really, the breath changes the shapes of the body.
Yeah. I think the breath is what differentiates yoga from any other workout, because when you go to the gym, like I like that Domenica's teacher had them start with breath, but I feel like most like personal trainers or coaches don't necessarily start that way. Maybe now things are changing, but also like I was trying to practice complete breath and I was laying down all crunched up. So I sat up while Domenica was reading that part, but still I'm not sitting up as straight as I could be. Like I was still crouched over. I had my leg up like this. I was rounding my spine and I'm trying to do this like, and I'm like, it's not going to work. So like you have to develop that straight spine, but you have to have a strong core to be able to hold yourself up. So some people can't do this, and that's okay, because we're so like this all day long over our computers, and we're driving and we're on our phones. So sometimes we just have to develop this, like, that's why planking I think is so beneficial, to build that strong core. But sometimes we have to like sit against the wall, or I love his example of standing. I always tell people to either sit against the wall or lay down flat, but I never thought of telling people to stand, or I forgot, because I love that once, because I don't like laying down and breathing. But I think just bringing awareness to people to create that strong passageway for the breath to flow, and then building that out.
Yeah. I hated it, but it was definitely good. It was like, oh, this again, this thing that I don't know what I'm doing.
The diaphragmatic breathing.
Yeah, I was always like, I don't get what you're saying.
I like that in this science of breath, though, they tell you to take that full breath in, and then somehow like, and I almost wonder, I don't know if you read the Hatha Yoga Pradipika book, and maybe this is something Amanda would have to help with, but the idea of when we were reading about the Sushumna Nadi and then the Ida and Pingala Nadis, which wrap around, like crisscross through the spinal column. So we take that full complete breath in, and then in Science of Breath, he says to slightly engage the abdomen, which is almost like engaging, for me, my abdomen lock, my Uddiyana Bandha lock, which then pushes the abdomen up a little bit to get the air to flow to the top part of the lungs. And when we were reading the Hatha Yoga Pradipika book, you take this full deeper breath in and you gauge all three locks, the root, the middle, the root, the belly, and the throat. And it holds the air in here. But I may be wondering if that engagement of the locks is to get the abdomen to move up.
Oh, yeah.
Swallow the air. So that was interesting.
Yeah, the fingers help me because it helps me feel that whether or not I'm caving down on the ribs or not. It helps me be more erect when I put the fingers on my ribs.
Yeah.
And then I can feel them expand as I'm breathing in. So this is definitely what he was teaching us.
Yeah. I feel like I have this, like I'm a pretty deep breather, just regularly. But having the hands on the abdomen is definitely helpful. So maybe each morning we'll do a few rounds of, oh, here comes Amanda, of complete nostril breath, complete yogi breath, which is kind of how I start it every day. I always like to start with that piece. Good morning, Amanda.
Morning.
I always like to have people start with those like deep breaths, like he's saying, before you move on to other breaths. This way you can just check in with what your body's doing and feeling like. Today we read about the complete yogi breath, which is basically just putting your hands on your belly and taking that full diaphragmatic breath in. Okay. Do we have anything else?
No.
All right, I'll guide us through some breath. Amanda, I was saying, I don't know if you're still listening, but I'll just say it again. So when we were reading today, and he was talking about the yogi complete breath being, you take that full breath in the bottom, middle, and top, but you do it in a fluid way instead of 3 pauses. You take the whole breath in, and at the top of the inhale, you slightly pull the abdomen up so that you're putting pressure on the lower diaphragm to move the breath from the bottom of the lungs to completely fill the top of the lungs. But he didn't mention anything about the locks, and I was wondering if this is similar to what Hatha Yoga Pradipika was talking about with the, I forgot what it's called, but they were talking about the Sushumna and the Ida and Pingala and this full breath. And in order to, I guess, engage the most amount of prana, we would take the full breath in and then engage the 3 locks, Mula, Uddiyana, chin, throat. And I was wondering if that same exercise is really just to get the abdomen to pull up to get that full deep breath. Because it sounded very similar.
That's a great question.
But I have to go back and, well, maybe he'll touch upon it as we keep reading.
I have an answer to that. I know that the locks kind of make the prana permeate the tissues. Yeah, like otherwise the prana is just sort of leaving the body when you exhale.
Yeah, he did mention the prana, the getting the full amount of prana out of the breath.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll have to look back at the Pradipika and think about that.
Yeah. Well, we'll start our breath. We'll take a few of those yogi complete breaths, however you want to do it, whether you're lying flat, sitting against the wall, sitting in a chair, standing. I'm sitting on a block. Just building that strong, straight spine. Maybe you're placing your hands on your belly. Taking a full breath in, expanding the belly, the middle chest, the top of the chest. And then at the top of the chest, the top of the inhale, when the breath comes to the top of the chest, playing with that slight engagement, pulling that abdomen underneath the lungs so that you can use that muscle to push the air up. And it's like a slight pause at the top. We don't have to hold our breath, just like a slight pause. And then a nice and slow controlled exhale. And then notice what your shoulders are doing too, because he did touch upon that. And I'm just noticing my shoulders. They lift up with the collarbone, allowing it to spread a little bit more. You can stay with this breath if this is what you want to work on today. Or after a few rounds of that, you can let your hands rest in your lap and bring your right hand to the face and take a few rounds of alternate nostril breath, closing the right nostril with the thumb. Inhale through the left. Close left, exhale right. Inhale right. Close right, exhale left. Inhale left. Close left, exhale right. Inhale right. Close right, exhale left. Inhale left. Close left, exhale right. Inhale right. Close right, exhale left. Inhale left. Close left, exhale right. Inhale right. Close right, exhale left. You can release your hand down to your lap. I'm going to set the timer. If you're still working on something, stay with it and you'll join us when you're ready. Bringing hands to heart center. Namaste. Have a beautiful day, everybody.
Namaste.